Hello and a good Sunday to you from Radically Rational and radicallyrational.com. Yeah, I got up even earlier than usual. Didn't like what I saw as the U.S. women's national team gets eliminated from World Cup competition. They go out in the round of 16. That's the earliest ever. They lose to Sweden in a match they dominated for most of the time. The match went to penalty kicks. The U.S. appeared to be in control there and then let it get away with unforced errors. So there will be no three-peat, but there will be ramifications. That was not good. It was great to see Simone Biles return to competitive gymnastics. She did a good job yesterday. She comes back in a big meet outside Chicago and wins the all-round competition. And again, that was a good sight. Justin Verlander looked solid in his first start back in Houston. Nevertheless, even though he pitched 7 strong innings, the Astros lost to the Yankees 3-1 to fall 2.5 games back of Texas in the AL West. I thought the Pro Football Hall of Fame ceremonies yesterday were wonderful. For Cowboy fans of my vintage, the Chuck Howley presentation by Bob Lilly was particularly moving. And you want emotional? How about DeMarcus Ware? What a remarkable speech. He relates an incident that he went through back in college at Troy in which he almost lost his life, thought he was going to, and how that impacted his life going forward. And then also he publicly forgave his father for his father's absence while he was growing up. And yes, the father was in attendance, but I thought everybody, Joe Thomas, Zach Thomas, Darrelle Revis, Rondé Barber, Joe Klecko, and the family of the late Ken Riley. That was just great. I do want to tell you a Don Coryell story. This is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Don Coryell, of course, was at one time the head coach of the St. Louis Cardinals, and his offensive line coach was Jim Hanifan, who later became the head coach of the St. Louis Cardinals. And Hanifan's a wonderful storyteller, and he told me this story. It's amazing. Coryell had a very pronounced lisp. Now, he wasn't defensive about it at all, so I'm not being insensitive here. But this was back in the day, and they were preparing for an opponent, and this was before video. You know, you had actual film in a dark room, and you got the little thumb switch there, and you're running it forward and backward. And so he's looking at this week's opponent, he meaning Coryell, and he's seeing something that's really getting to him. He's really worried about this. So he's running it back and forth, and Hanifan says, Coryell's face the blood just came up from his chin through the top of his head. And finally, he looks over and he goes, Jim, why is everyone always trying to beat us? Don Coryell, one of the most innovative and impactful coaches ever. Okay, here's my biggest problem with Donald Trump. He's not an American. No, I'm not saying he was born in Kenya, and no, I don't need to look at his birth certificate, but he's not American. Not only does he not understand our institutions, he hates them and has been pretty proactive and direct in saying that he wants to dismantle them. We don't do these things here. We don't decline the peaceful transfer of power. We don't incite insurrection. We don't threaten and intimidate witnesses. We don't make thuggish mob boss statements like, you come after me, I'm coming after you. We don't do that. Now understand, he is of course entitled to a fair trial, or 4 or 5. Okay? I'm all for that. But we don't need to wait for the results of those trials to determine this. That man is completely unfit to serve and must never get as much as another sniff of the White House. I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that he does not return. I invite you to join that effort because it's the radically rational thing to do.